Hello, everybody. Hello. Oh. Hi and welcome. Sorry. Oh. Okay. Welcome to our third episode of our Activism Corner. So for everybody who's new to this format, I'm just gonna quickly explain. So our Activist Corner is our monthly discussion where we choose always a topic about a cool project or activist that we like, and we will talk about this topic to give you some more inspiration about what you can do and what you can include in your activism. Today we are going to talk about the Generation Equality Forum. This forum goes back because 25 years ago, through the Beijing Declaration, women's rights were accepted within the international community as human rights. And this forum is here to kind of look back on what all has been happening and to create an action plan for the upcoming 5 to 10 years of what still has to be done. And Equipop, they are going to be our guests today. They created an activist guide to give you all the information about what you can do, how you can get engaged about this forum, and what you can change. So today we're going to talk with Noemi. She is the editor-in-chief of the Activist Guide, and she's part of Equipop, and she's here to talk with us about this forum. She already sent me an invite. I think I sent her to join it. Yes.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Okay, now I have to change my phone.
Hello, everyone.
Let me.
Do you hear me well?
Yes, we hear you well. Welcome, Noemi.
Thank you.
I'm excited that we can have this live talk with you guys today, and with you mostly. Present yourself, give our audience, tell them who you are, what you're doing.
Of course. So hello everyone. So happy to be here with you to talk about this very important topic today. So I'm Noemi from Switzerland, but based in France right now. And I'm 25 years old. I'm finishing right now a master in human rights and humanitarian action. And next to that, I'm working for Equipop as a consultant. And I'm also very engaged in sexual and reproductive health and rights in Switzerland with Laura, actually. So we know each other from activism. And I'm also a member of YSAFE. So I know YSAFE very well and yeah, also engaged in that. And so maybe I can present also Equipop, because I don't think that everyone knows what organization that is. So Equipop is really a feminist association that acts for the rights and health of women and girls in the world. And we work in very close partnership with local actors, but then right up to the highest level of international decision making. So at the UN, to really fight against gender inequality. And we promote feminist values and place really the gender approach at the heart of our interventions. And we work mostly in West Africa. We have also offices in Burkina Faso and Senegal, but also at the European level and in France. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so everybody who doesn't know Noemi, she's really a diehard feminist and activist. So follow her to always have a source of inspiration, because she will inspire you. But now about Equipop and the activist guide that you created together with the network of young feminists of Western Western feminist. Yeah.
From
You,
yeah.
sorry. So you created this activist guide to kind of mobilize young people around this Generation Equality Forum. About the guide itself, we're going to talk some later about that. Firstly, about the Generation Equality Forum. Can you tell us some more about what it is, why it's so important, and why the youth should get mobilized around it?
Of course. So the Generation Equality Forum is really a big global gathering, public discussion, gathering a lot of different actors together on an international level. So there is the private sector involved, but also foundations, NGOs, of course, really grassroots organizations and youth groups. They all gonna gather together, and of course states, very important, in order to really accelerate the process of gender equality in the next 5 to 10 years. So they are all working in working groups, which are called action coalitions. There are 6 action coalitions, and all these different actors are in these working groups, and they are right now working on an action plan, actually, for different issues. So one issue is gender-based violence, one is economic justice and rights, one is bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights, one is feminist action for climate justice, one is technology and innovation for gender equality, and one is feminist movements and leadership. And so it's really after 25 years, after the Beijing conference, as you already said, it was like really the biggest momentum for women's rights internationally, because it was the first time women's rights were really recognized as being human rights. And it was a very progressive moment also. Like there was a program of action which had very progressive language, such as women have the right to control their sexuality, things which are right now even under attack, but 25 years ago, it was very progressive. And it was really the power of activism, feminist solidarity, and youth leadership that brought about this transformative change 25 years ago. And the challenge is the same today at this Generation Equality Forum. It's really a key moment for activists from all sectors of society. And it's really to accelerate this process of gender equality, but also to hold governments accountable for their commitments they did 25 years ago, and also push them to do new commitments, to speak about financial commitments and legal commitments, like that they are changing laws. And it's really to put issues on the political agenda. And it's so important that young people are very involved in this, because it's such an important moment on the international level. And it's the young people which are not only the future, but they are also just the present. And oh, it was.
Sorry, the last part was just cut off. After that, you said the youth is also the present.
Exactly. And so that's why it's so important to be engaged at the Generation Equality Forum and really use this momentum to really also speak about the realities young people live and what is important for them concerning gender equality.
I think that's an important point that you mentioned. Mostly adult people always say we have to encourage young leaders because they will be the future, but it's not about the future. Like, we care because we care now. We don't care because we will be adults in 10 years. Our opinions matter now.
Exactly.
So what you said, so in the Beijing Declaration from 25 years ago, there were kind of 12 main risk fields that were pointed out where women's rights really have to be advanced. So this included areas such as health, education, poverty, also women in media or women in armed conflicts, for example. So how did we advance in the last 25 years? Is it still the same fields that we need to work on? Did they change? Are there new key areas that we have to work on?
Mm-hmm. Like, UN Women really created this Generation Equality Forum to address this unfinished business of Beijing, because no, unfortunately, it's of course there were advancements, but there are a lot of lacks still, and there is no country who really implemented this program of action, which was adopted 25 years ago. And so, yeah, it's still kind of the same issues we're working on, and we should work on, because it's unfinished business. But it's also important to recognize that there were advancements, just as like legalizing abortion in some countries, or starting to do comprehensive sexuality education, or creating hotlines for survivors of domestic violence. But what is also important, that in these 25 years, there were also setbacks. So from right-wing politicians, from conservative powers, like Trump and the global gag rule, these were huge setbacks, actually. So
Maybe
we still...
Just to explain quickly, for not everybody knows what the gag rule is. So it's kind of Trump instated a rule for every organization that gets funding from the United government, that they're not allowed to support abortion, or to state even that they support abortion. So if they did that, they didn't get any funding anymore, and it had very bad consequences for all the organizations that were supported by the American government. Sorry, you think?
Yeah, and so there were setbacks, and it's also important to speak about that, and not to think that the gender equality is just a curve and is going up. It's very wavy, and these 25 years were very wavy. But what is also important to see is that feminist movements really became stronger, more networked, like this transnational feminism, which is very networked, and there's a lot of experience how to do advocacy. And so we really look forward to see that also at the Generation Equality Forum, how this changed in these 25 years, and how they are much more strong now, even if they were already very strong 25 years ago, but they are more networked, and this could help to go further. What is also important, or changed a bit, is like now there's really a huge movement of this anti-imperialist feminism. So go away from this saviorism, like thinking that Western cultural forms are the only morally right ones. And this is very nice to see that this movement is very strong now, and we think that we're going to see that at the Generation Equality Forum also. And what I think is that there are new issues like technology, sexism and violence in technology, but also climate change, and how women and marginalized groups are really suffering the most from climate change, and how it's really interrelated with gender equality and sexual and reproductive health and rights. And this we see also in the action coalitions, because there is an action, like a working group on technology and innovation, and there is a group on climate change and feminist activism in climate change, but also action coalition about feminist movements, because the international community starts to recognize that these are very powerful movements, but they need resources, and we have to speak about that, and funds and all of this. So it's very, like, we see how these new topics are very well portrayed also in these action coalitions at the Generation Equality Forum.
So you already talked about how youth voices should be important in this whole process. That's why you created this activist guide. So, and the Generation Equality Forum actually said they really want to have this youth-centered approach and to amplify their voices. How can we assure that it's really meaningful engagement and not just things they say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good question, very important. Yeah, we really have to go away from this tokenism at international conferences, like doing just photos with young people and young activists and thinking, yeah, we had youth engagement. And it's so important that these young activists are really at the decision-making table and like there where the whole strategy is made, but also in the planning of the Generation Equality Forum, and that they are really from A to C doing decisions. And that's only possible if they have also the resources, because you can't just say, yeah, come to the decision-making table and you were there and you can really participate, because that's not enough. Young people, they need funding to do this international advocacy things. They need also like more technical resources. So they really need capacity building so that they really know how to also influence the decision-making process. And also very practical stuff such as translation is very important, because if not, we have just very privileged young people also who are participating. So there has to be very good translation in different languages in order that young people also feel comfortable to speak in their languages. So there is a lot of stuff which is needed, that there is a real youth engagement. And yeah, that's also why we did this activism toolkit, because Generation Equality Forum is very kind of inaccessible, because it's very complicated and complex as a process. And we just saw that a lot of young people don't even know what it is or how to like access it, kind of. And so we try to really vulgarize this whole system in order to make it accessible, and at the same time give resources, like capacity building resources, so they really like can be engaged. But what we do is a lot of internal advocacy with the organizers of the Generation Equality Forum for proper translation, for real youth engagement, like saying that they need funding. You have to fund these young people if you want them to participate, and things like that. Because if we don't do that, this advocacy for more accessible systems for young people, it's going to be tokenism. It's going to be not a real youth engagement.
Preach to everything you said. Like, for me, that's the most I don't know, ironic thing to say. You want to care about youth voices, but then you do not want to invest anything into them. It just doesn't work. If you want to see a result from that youth motivation, then you have to give them the resources to be able to implement it into real actions. And just wish thinking to think just of pure youth motivation, everything will be changed. No, it's not going to work like that. And also an important point that you said, I think that goes back to like this imperialistic feminism. I think with the translation, that not everything is just in English, from this like old colonialistic view. That is a super important point that you said. So to our next question, COVID-19 kind of showed us once again that marginalized groups, like that are already marginalized in emergency situations, they often get left out even more and just are put more in vulnerable situations. When it comes to women, for example, now domestic violence in a lot of countries went up through this whole isolation and quarantine. What do you think will be the place of COVID in this forum?
I think it's going to be big, because like all the women's rights organizations are very like active on that, and also like collecting data to show how detrimental it was, especially for women and vulnerable groups, and also showing how like some of our systems are not resilient to these kind of crises. And it shows also some lack in our systems, such as when we speak about abortion, and how during like this pandemic, it wasn't considered to be a basic health service. And there was a lot of unwanted pregnancies during COVID, but no access to abortion. And it showed how it's important to have very resilient sexual and reproductive health and rights systems in place to be able to react properly if there is a kind of crisis in our societies. And I think these lessons learned from this time of the pandemic is really taken into account. It's very present. and also that there will be events about like COVID-19 and what the effects were and are still, and how to also like answer to this crisis with a feminist lens and a gender approach, and to integrate feminists, activists into like the response to this crisis, which is so important. And if we don't react properly, we're gonna have a huge setback on gender equality with this COVID crisis.
So what, as YSAFE, we evidently care a lot about sexual and reproductive health and rights. So lately they have come under great attack, be it, for example, from Turkey, who officially stated that they're going to pull out of the Istanbul Convention. For everybody who does not know the Istanbul Convention, it's kind of the most advanced, progressive international statement about gender-based violence and the protection of women of gender-based violence. So governments obviously will also participate at this forum. But how can we then assure that SRHR will receive the place that they deserve when at the same time there is a movement against SRHR? How can we really, as feminists, like as a women movement, make that place for SRHR?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very important question. What is very important to know about the Generation Equality Forum is that not all governments are going to participate. It's only the governments who really want to do something about gender equality. So Turkey, for example, until now, they are not engaged into this process, which can be seen as a positive thing, because there are only very progressive countries which really go further than what exists already as international laws and treaties on sexual and reproductive health and rights. They go really further than that, and this can become kind of a agenda setting on what are the standards, international standards of sexual and reproductive health and rights. That's why this forum is also so interesting, because it's a new form. It's a very innovative form of international forum about women's rights. So we really should use that to push for a very progressive sexual and reproductive health and rights agenda within this Generation Equality Forum. And what is also important to know is that there is an action coalition on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. So it's one of the 6 main topics in this forum. So there is a lot of space for sexual and reproductive health and rights. And at the moment they are prioritizing comprehensive sexuality education, access to legal and safe abortion, and bodily autonomy in this action coalition, which is quite nice to see, because it's very progressive, to be able to speak about abortion in an international setting. It's kind of unbelievable. So it's very interesting. But that's also why it's so important to speak about this forum and to speak about YSAFE members, because there needs to be a really great engagement of also young people being engaged in sexual and reproductive health and rights locally, because they can push for progressive language, and then they can take these commitments of the countries, take it back to their local communities, and ask accountability of these governments and real change. And even if their governments are not engaged, they still can take this language and say, hello, that was an international forum, that's an action plan on the international level, what's going on in our country. It's a very powerful tool, I think. So that's why it's so important that young activists know about this forum and the great place of sexual and reproductive health and rights in the forum, because it's going to be very useful. And what is also important is that sexual and reproductive health and rights are not only treated in this working group, but that they are seen as a transversal issue. So that also, if we're going to speak about climate change, sexual and reproductive health and rights is so important. And that's also why we need this YSAFE activists, or any kind of activists who are also pushing for this transversal view of sexual and reproductive health and rights.
Yeah, I think what you said about the international community, I think a lot of people do not get or cannot see the potential that international statement has, even if it's not obligatory. It is a country set internationally in front of the whole community. They want to do that, and that is your power. If your country set that internationally, you can use that and like kind of play with their image that they have internationally. If they promise such thing, they also have to keep their face and want to implement that. And that is always a super important step of changing something, just the country stating that, even if they do not implement it, but just by that statement, you can use that in your work. So yeah, the forum is super important. And how you said, you created this activist guide now for the youth. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about this guide. Tell us more about what it is. Why did you, so I think you already said a lot about why you decided to create it, but for who is it and what was kind of the process of the creation?
Yeah, sure. So we created this guide for like anyone. We really tried to be as vulgar in our language as possible, that it's very accessible for any kind of person. It's not only for activists already active in women's rights and feminism, it's also for people just being interested about this and want to become active and take this Generation Equality Forum as their first activism kind of. And what is very important is that we created this activism guide in a partnership with the network of young feminists from Western Africa. It's a network of young feminist activists from over 8 countries in the Francophone region of Africa. And they have a lot of expertise in gender equality and all related issues, but also how to make their voices heard and how to do activism. So we did kind of a workshop to really develop 5 suggestions or possibilities of doing activism, and tried to do it as practical as possible. So there are really like to-do lists, what you have to do if you want to do an action in the online space. So you really can just take this activism guide and go to what kind of activism you want to do. And there is a to-do list, which really helps you to what are the steps to take if you want to become active. So yeah, it's very an educational, fun activist guide. And it also shows how everyone can become active. You don't have to be like very political. You can also be an artist and do something for the Generation Equality Forum and speak up for a certain issue. So it's really like, it's very fun to go through this activism guide and take these things out of it, which you need or which speak to you.
Yeah, so also for everybody, I don't think I already said it. So everybody who has not read the guide yet, we made a post about it last week, but also there's a link in our bio to the guide. So always feel free to go check it out, do so. And how is the guide structured? And what are its core values of the guide?
So it's structured in like 2 parts. The first part is really key informations about Generation Equality Forum. What is it? Like everything you have to know to become engaged in this process. And the second part is where we speak about activism and 5 different forms of activism. So it's really, yeah, first information and then going to action actually. And I think the core values in the creation was to make it with young activists who are really living this in their life. So we really know that it's appropriate what we're telling. It was very important to do a section about intersectionality because it's so important to take into account intersectionality in every action we do. But also to be very youth-centered and motivational and showing that everyone is legitimate to take action and do activism, and that, yeah, you have really the right to speak up. You have enough expertise just because you are living in in a world where you have in a patriarchal world, so you have your experiences and you have something to say in any case. That was very important. And also, like, the guide exists in French and English, and we created it in French. And we have also part about how important it is to have francophone voices in these international spaces, because as we talked about before, it's very international forums and conferences are very Anglophone still, which is a huge problem, I think, for a lot of young people. It's very inaccessible for a lot of people not speaking English. So we also speak about how important it is to really just start and being engaged in these forums and to ask for translation and just to show up and say that you want to be part of it and you need this and this and this in order to do so. Yeah.
It sounds like a very comprehensive and inclusive guide. So you already mentioned one value is intersectionality. So for everybody who does not know what intersectionality is, it's kind of the view that different identities and discrimination, they can layer one over the other and create a new form of discrimination that is only lived by those people that have this intersecting identities and discrimination. So for example, me as a white woman, I experience sexism, but it is not the same sexism as, for example, a person of color or like a woman of color would experience. She has at least two intersecting discrimination, and therefore she lives a different reality than I do and lives different discrimination than I do. So what I want to ask is, how can somebody assure to be intersectional in their work and projects if they do not face those discrimination? Because it's exactly that what I said. I do not have the same realities as somebody else, but I want to include them. How can you still make sure that you are intersectional?
Mm-hmm. I think it's a very difficult question, and I think everyone is still like a bit like looking into it and finding ways to do this properly. It's kind of a process, but I think it's just so important to like put this intersectional lens on for everything you do, so that you really recognize that there are different kind of discriminations and lived experiences, and that you can't like really know what kind of discrimination and how this feels and what are the consequences out of that, but that also you know that everything you do has a consequence and different consequences for different kind of people. And I think the most important thing is to give these people the keys in order to speak up for themselves. So to really give them the resources and the capacity building and everything they need, so they can speak up and they can talk about these discriminations. And when we take the Generation Equality Forum, then that's why we really try to push for proper translation, and why we do a lot of capacity building of young feminists in order to let them speak up for themselves, because it's not very intersectional to just speak for other people, kind of. It's very important to let them have their own voices, because as you said, we don't know how this feels like and what are really the consequences of this triple discriminations or even more. So that's very important. And also, like in every advocacy or any action you do, that you really take into account these different lived realities, and that you don't think it's just there is just one truth, or that for every woman it's important to have that and that. It's really important to take into account that there are very different lived experiences, and try to take them into account and really to include these people to advise you on what is really important. Yeah,
I think what you say, like the listening aspect, because even if you don't comprehend it, it is not up to you to comprehend that discrimination. You cannot understand it, and it's not even what you have to do. It's just that you have to listen and you have to take it in and put it in your work, even if you do not understand it, because just by you not being in that place, you will never have a full understanding of that. So yeah. Also, sometimes people tend to lack motivation to really get engaged. And also, I feel like young people often feel like their voice can't really matter, they don't know enough, so they feel like it's not even their place to really make an action. And then, of course, if resources are missing, then it's impossible even to make actions. How should this guide motivate people? How should this guide give like hope or inspiration that you can really do something, your voice matters, and those actions that you wrote into this guide, they will bring change?
I think we tried to do that in how, like, we really give very concrete advices, what you can do to be engaged in this Generation Equality Forum, and how to really hold countries accountable also. So you really show how you can, for example, ask to review budgets for gender equality projects and demand increases in budgets, or really concretely ask to abolish discriminatory laws and policies, also demanding governments to collect disaggregated data, so that they are really disaggregated by gender, age, and so on, so that you know what are the lived experiences. Like, there is a lot of advices what exactly you can demand, which is very concrete. It's not only like saying hold your government accountable, it's because that's not very understandable for a lot of young people. So we really tried to be very concrete and give advices which you can really just take and put it into real life. And what we also tried to show is, as I said already, that everyone is legitimate to raise their voices and to speak about gender equality. And it makes very clear that we need these youth voices and youth commitments, and also this expertise of young people in order to really have a transformative change. So yeah, I think also this very fun part in this guide, this very, like this, when we speak about this different form of activism, we show how it can be very fun actually to do activism. It can be very creative, and that's how we really tried to be motivational, like showing that it's possible, showing that we can really change something by using this Generation Equality Forum to do something locally, nationally, and internationally. And also showing that, because often also young people or people in general think that international conferences are just talking and not really changing anything, which can be true, but like international conferences are what we make out of it. So we have to use this and apply and take these commitments of governments, or this language, these action plans, and take it to our home, to our communities, and really start to hold these governments accountable for that. So it's very, yeah, it's what we make out of it, kind of.
Yeah, I think that's an important point for me personally. International convention, also not for the convention itself, because countries are very quick to just say something because they want to look a certain way and be perceived in a certain way. For me, what those conventions are is what I said before. It is then what the activists make out of it, to just hold your country accountable through that statement that they made. So for me, the system is not making the convention, but then young people, everybody who is engaged, to push the leaders to actually implement what they promised. And another important point is really what you said, is like, it's for everybody. Like, everybody has a voice. It doesn't matter if it's talking, writing, singing, drawing, doing sports. No matter what you love, you will find a way to use this for your activism and to make a change with that. So really to take this guide, and they also put great examples of it, of really artsy actions that you can do, like really diverse actions. So really just take this guide and look at what you love to do and try to implement it with that. And you will see that activism is fun. Otherwise, Noemi would not be in it since like 10 years, and I wouldn't be in it since like 6 years. It's work, but it's also fun. And you will meet great people and do great things. So
For sure.
one last question from our part. Of course, it is really important to do something, but it can also be very exhausting. It takes so much energy to always care about what is going wrong, and just like always only seeing what is wrong, and you just think you always push and nothing happens. So self-care of activists is also a very important part. Do you have any tips on that? How can we ensure that we keep our mental health?
Yeah, such an important question and topic to speak about. I think it's very important to know that self-care is not about taking a bath or buying any kind of self-care products. It's very transversal. It has to be like in everything you do, there has to be self-care. I think a very important thing is to take a step back sometimes and give you the legitimacy not to be available all the time and not to be an activist maybe all the time. So it's really fine to do other stuff. It's fine to be a feminist activist and to watch Gossip Girl and other trash series. You don't have to be all the time this activist. I think that's very important, because that can be so exhausting to be very strict with yourself and allowing you things and not allowing you things because you are in this activist position. I think that's very exhausting, and important to say you have the legitimacy to do other stuff and to take a step back and to just switch off. What another thing which I think is very important is to talk with other feminist activists and really try to have each other's back. Also when you are attacked, for example, as a feminist activist, which is very often the case, unfortunately, and also learn from each other and just supporting each other. I think that's a very big part of self-care in feminism or feminist activism. Another thing is just to be proud of yourself, even for very small achievements and like for small things you do, but just have this proudness of what you do and give you the credits. And because it's very hard sometimes, because it can be so frustrating, because activism takes years to change something. Mm-hmm. And so it's very important just to be proud about very small steps you're taking as an activist. And also I think it's important sometimes to depersonalize your activism, so that you don't take everything very personally, just like that you know that you are fighting for a cause and it's not all the time like yourself, or like that you take all the comments or everything which is coming back very personally. I think that's very important, that you see that as something like also like outside of you, especially if there are attacks, that you really know that these attacks are also they are there because they fear us. Like these people are afraid of the power of feminism, and that's actually a good thing. So and then most importantly, if you are really not well about something, then look for professional help, reach out, go to psychotherapy. It's fine, it's okay to do that. And I think it's very important that you look for yourself first thing, because you can't help anybody by like burning out and not taking care about yourself. So I think it's such an important thing, and I think it was a bit forgotten kind of in the feminist space, or in the whole activism, and now it's a very present topic, and I think it's so important and so good that we like speak about that and share resources and share advices how to do self-care. Yeah.
For me, I think also an important thing is you do not have to hold every single discussion. Like if you know you have the fights when you're in your organization, for example, do them there. And if you go out, you can set boundaries, not just because every stupid, sometimes they just want to provocate you. You do not have to hold every single discussion. If they want to think women do not deserve rights, then let them think that. You can go back tomorrow in your organization and you will work then for it. You have to set boundaries and kind of set spaces where, you know, in this space I fight, and then this space I'm just gonna leave it be, and that it's okay. It's, I think also often when you're engaged into something and something is important, then people try to find every little detail that you do not do perfectly and then say, well, everything you do does not matter because you listen to hip hop that has sexist language. But it's that what you do is still way more than like other people, than those people that attack you too. And it's just, they don't want to see that change that you're changing. So they like try to take your power away. But like how Noemi said, know that what you're doing, that is it's impactful, it's powerful, you can be proud of that. And they try to take that away by trying to attack you, but it's okay if you're not in every space an activist. You can listen to hip hop, you can watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and you will still stay a feminist.
Exactly, very important.
Yeah, then I think with our questions, we're already at the end. If anybody has anything still to ask, just write in the comments, and otherwise I will give also Noemi the space if you just want to share one more thing, to say one last words.
My last words are that I really hope that there are people also in this sexual and reproductive health and rights group kind of space who take this Generation Equality Forum and do something with it. I think it's really a key moment for the next years in women's rights on the international level. So really take this moment and use it and appropriate this process and take it and do something locally, nationally, or internationally. And yeah, I really hope that this guide helps you with that, gives you all the keys you need to become engaged, and that you really also apply this activism suggestions. And we are here if you have any questions. You can also DM us, Equipop. And if you have a question about the guide or Generation Equality Forum, you can also text us. And if you're Francophone, so French speaking, we have a Facebook group, which I can put afterwards in the comments, where you can go, like you can join us there, and we are sharing a lot of information there about the Generation Equality Forum, but it's also just a space for Francophone activists to exchange and maybe even plan some actions for the Generation Equality Forum.
So we got one question. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how an organization can support its young activists, for example, when there's a backlash in media?
Very interesting question. Hi, Louise. So I think what is very important in general for young activists is to give the resources, as we said before. I think it's not okay just to think that's because these are young people that they can do volunteer things. I think they need to have the resources to really do the work, and it should be compensated, all the hours they invest in activism. So that's, I think, very important. And for like backlashes in media and in general, I think it's very important to train properly young activists, like to give them all the resources and the keys on how to react to such things, like really speak about self-care, like when they are starting to get active, so that they know how to take care of themselves and how to protect themselves if there are backlashes. And another thing which I think is very important is that an organization is there and holds their back if something happens, and really like supports them with every means they have, because then I think it's much more easier if you really have an organization in your back than if you are just alone and you feel alone with a backlash. So yeah, I think it's very important then to stand with your young activists if something happens, and yeah, to give them all the resources to be safe in activism.
And I think also having just the general energy in the organization, try to have not like supportive, but also that it's not just also always only about the work, like doing little activities at the side of it that are fun, or maybe just within the meetings also having place to just share and just get to know each other, exchange, so that not everything that you connect to the organization is the work and the feedback that you'll get back from that, so that there's different emotions that you have that are connected with this organization, so that you're like kind of have a little wall when there's backlash coming.
For sure.
Okay, then I think that was it. Thank you, Noemi and Equipop, so much for coming to talk to us, but also for creating this activist guide and for all the work that you're doing. I think it's really a great guide that really gives hands-on tips and super easy to implement. So for all the listeners, really go take a look. Again, the link is in our bio, and for sure you will also find it if you go on the Instagram from Equipop. Yeah, and if you have any questions, there's also our DMs that are always open. If you search any local organization somewhere you can get engaged, just slide in. And if you have any other subject you would like us to talk about in a future activism corner, then of course you're also very welcome in our DMs. So thank you so much, Noemi, and thank you so much for our listeners.
Thank you so much, Laura, for all your work and activism and for creating this activist corner, which is so nice. Thank you so much, YSAFE, for the invitation. And yeah, we're gonna keep fighting together.
Yeah, till the end.
Exactly. Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you, and have a nice evening. Bye.
Bye, everyone.